Alright folks, welcome back. Last time we broke the game. This time we try to beat the game. If you haven't already heard, endless mode might not actually be endless. And if that's the case, what does the end look like? And how do we get there? Now, before we get too excited and start taking game actions, I do want to give you a history lesson, maybe 20 minutes of background information. So in the description of this video, I actually have a link to another one. It is not on the Balatro University channel. It is a collaboration that I did with another YouTuber, Scooty. Actually, he streams on Twitch every day. In the Balatro Invitational High Score competition, before the game was released, Scooty was in first place from I think 2 hours to 22 hours. And so sort of held the crown the longest until, of course, he was beaten at the end. I feel like I say this about everybody, but Scooty, very chill, funny, smart guy. It was a ton of fun hanging out with him. The thing that I really love the most about Scooty is he has what I call a growth mindset. And so, whenever he's playing a game, when he's playing Balatro, he's always looking to improve. He's always asking the right questions. And so if you haven't already, go follow him on Twitch and on YouTube as well. Now, let's go back 2 weeks. Let's go back 2 weeks to the launch of the game. One of the first things that I did, first video, first run, was we played on the plasma deck and we're trying to live as long as possible. So live as long as possible means we need to score enough points in order to meet these higher and higher demands, these scoring thresholds. And then that lets us live for longer. And, before the game was released, when we were theory crafting, what would be the deck that has the highest scoring potential? We said, okay, the plasma deck. Plasma deck is going to make it easier to score higher. And the scoring technology that we used was mostly this. It was mostly the idle. So this is ×2 mult per card that you play. And the way that the idle works is it picks a random card in your deck, so sort of uniformly between all of the different options, and then that's how it decides. If all of your deck is all the same card, then this will always be the same card. And so what we did was we did a bunch of Kings of Hearts, and we said, okay, every King of Hearts that I play is going to give me a ×2. And then combine that with Sock and Buskin gives you a re-trigger on all of your face cards. And then so now all of my face cards are now ×2 and then ×2 again. And then, a bunch of ×2s on top of that. We also have, things like the Deja Vu gives us the Red Seal. Red Seal gives us a re-trigger on those, idle ×2s and those sorts of things. And, with that technology, we're able to score something like E84. That's 10 to the 84th power. So you've got some number followed by 84 zeros, or 84 decimal places, I guess. Not really decimal, but anyway, I'm just going to say E84 because that's shorter, that's easier for me. So we did that on the plasma deck. We got to Ante 25, and then, okay, the scores just got too big. We weren't able to keep up with it. Then, okay, this last week, we stumbled upon this Perkeo technology. And, even that first day, that launch day when we were discussing the plasma deck run, the Ante 25 run, we had thought about, using, instead of the effects when you play the card, like the idle gives you ×2 on each card when it's played, what if we use these effects these held in hand effects? So for example, the steel cards, you get ×1.5 mult when it's held in hand. And then on top of that, you can add the Baron. The Baron gives you another ×1.5 on these held in hand type things. And by the way, the Red Seal re-triggers not just the played abilities, but also the held in hand, also re-triggered. Gold cards also re-triggered. And then on top of that, instead of the Sock and Buskin re-triggering the cards that you play, we have Mime re-triggering the cards that you hold. And we said, oh, okay. is it possible for us to score big with this type of technology? And what I decided was, well, you can play more cards than you can hold. And so probably this is not the move, right? Probably you want the idle, you want the triggers when you play the cards, not when you hold the cards. Also, it takes two 1.5s, 1.5 times 1.5 in order to get to 1 times 2. But, with Cryptid adds extra cards to your hand, and so you get a larger hand size, and with more cards in your hand, then you can score more multipliers, right? More times 1.5s, or however many of these that there are. And the legendary Perkeo, what allows you to do is you can get more and more copies of these cryptids. Because they're negatives, you can kind of stack up infinite copies of these. You can just keep collecting them forever and save them for a future time when you actually need them. When you need to score, you can use them and then get a very large hand. And so for one, when we were theory crafting in the Balatro Discord, someone asked me, well, do you think it's possible to break the scoring limit of the game? By the way, the way the game is programmed, the way the game engine works, if you score higher than, I think it's like E308, let's just call it 300. So E300, that's 10 to the 300th power. If you score higher than that amount, then the game just records it as infinity. It's kind of off the charts. It's beyond the capabilities of the game to record and report. And so the question is, okay, is it possible to go infinite? That's what we call it, go infinite. And me being kind of lazy with the scoring calculation, I was like, probably not, right? You would need a lot of kings in order to make that happen. But, okay, with all of these negative cryptids, then it opens this possibility, well, maybe if I had 40 of these saved up and I added 80 kings to my hand, okay, then maybe you could do it. But it would just be one time, right? You use all the cryptids, they add all these cards to your hand, you play it, that's it. You scored a bunch of points, but you're not going to be able to do that consistently. You're not going to be able to do that repeatedly. So for the purposes of, getting the high score, getting the infinite score, we were able to do that. In this last video, we were able to do that. But if I want to live forever, let's go in here and look at the blinds. And so from ante 14 to ante 15, E13 to E16, what that means is this is a difference of 10 to the 13 versus 10 to the 16. That's a difference of 1,000 times. And the difference between E16 and E20, that's a difference of 10,000 times. And then in ante 7, it's going to be 100,000 times. 5 more zeros than before, 6 more zeros than before. And so it grows very, very rapidly, grows faster than your ability to produce cryptids, right? If that's the thing, is to use the cryptids to get extra cards in your hand, this will outpace that. This will grow faster than that. Following this trend here, so this is, +4, +5, +6, it takes until ante 38, and then in order to get to that scoring limit, where it's E308, and then when you get to ante 39, okay, the score is infinite. You need to score not just infinite once, but you need to score infinite every round in order to keep surviving. Well, it turns out actually the game, even if you do score the infinite score, it's still counted as not enough. And so that's it. That's the end, is ante 39. And so the question is, okay, well, how do we do that? How do we get there? Well, it turns out if you have enough blueprint and enough brainstorm, enough copies of Mime and Baron, you can get, like times, I don't know, something like times 100,000 from one king, right? And then you can use cryptid and copy a king, and that's times 100,000 and times another 100,000, and you so on. And so it turns out not that hard to keep scoring high consistently. And so if we have, Perkeo producing these cryptids early on, in the first 12 antes or whatever, or, the first 20 antes, I don't need to keep using all of my cryptids. I just need to use enough cryptids. And so here, what we're doing is we've got blueprint copying mime, and we've got just the one Baron not being copied at all, though this mime is being copied a bunch of times here by all of these blueprints on the mime, and then all of these brainstorms on the mime. If I ship this hand here, this nice and big high card here, if you've seen the last video, then you've seen this before. You know what we're doing here. Already on the first king, we got the flames. You already got the billion points. Goes up to, E31 already in ante 12. And then also we get all the retriggers on the gold cards. And so, that's the type of thing that we're doing. And then let's say, I do that. And then every round I'm scoring E31. And then if we go here to, ante 16 is 20, ante 17 is 25, ante 18 is 31. So already, ante 18, E31, I can't do it anymore. I play the same hand, it doesn't score enough points. And so what we can do is once we get to ante 18, we can use one cryptid each round. That'll give me extra cards, that'll give me extra scoring. And then, maybe later on we get to ante 25. And then in ante 25, the one cryptid per round doesn't work anymore. And so I use two cryptids per round. Still with Perkeo producing, if I use 2 per round and then Perkeo produces, 6 per round, then, I'm producing more than I'm using, and then later on I'm using more, and then, maybe I'm cutting into my reserves. I have a bunch that I have saved up. So, in theory, we should be able to keep scoring high enough for a while, or at least, long enough to beat ante 39. And so, the last one that we did was an unseeded run. I just, spun up a random seed. I kept re-rolling until I got the Perkeo legendary start. This time, it's going to be a seeded run. And so the reason why I put the link to the previous video, or this collaboration video that I did with Scooty, was this seed we did already on his stream. And so we sort of explored in the first 12 antes. We were already get the infinite score by ante 12. And so what I've done now is I just ran it through again on my own. And so, I'm not going to show you the first part of this. You can kind of get the flavor of it, kind of see what kind of stuff shows up in the other video. But here we're just going to jump in partway through. But I will highlight some differences. So one difference is, before we were playing on the spectral deck, the ghost deck. The ghost deck allows you to get the spectral cards in the shop, and that was because the spectral cards, you need to get a cryptid not in a spectral pack, but you need to get a cryptid as one of your consumables in order for Perkeo to copy it. And so with the ghost deck, it's very easy to do that. You just find it in the shop, you buy it, and then there you go. What I've done differently this time is we're using the plasma deck instead, because the plasma deck, it is easier to score higher. But then that comes at the cost of, okay, well, how do I get the cryptid? And so what we did was we found a Sixth Sense Joker. So if we go in here, collection, Jokers, there's the... It's a funky looking one. Where is it? There's Sixth Sense. When you play a 6, it goes away, but then you get a spectral card. And so we use the Sixth Sense in the early part of the run, in the early part of this run, in order to get the cryptid. Also, we ended up getting a couple of ectoplasms. And so maybe different in this run compared to the other video that I did with Scooty. We've got 2 negatives from ectoplasm. One, I got a natural negative on a blueprint. And so it being a seeded run, I played a little bit more carefully with the money, and then I was able to re-roll more and was able to find this negative blueprint, which is huge because when I was doing the collaboration with Scooty, we didn't have room for that many jokers, and so we had to sell the Perkeo, and we had to just use Mime and Baron and just convert to scoring without any more cryptids. We had some cryptids that we saved up, but then we didn't have any access to more, and so we went for the mega infinite scoring hand, and then that was it as a one shot. What I want to do differently this time is I want to keep producing cryptids. I want to keep going further and further, trying to reach that Ante 39. And so I need to keep Perkeo around, and the only way that I'm able to do that is by having, so many of these negatives. Like I said, 2 of these from Ectoplasm, 1 of these a natural negative blueprint. Let's see here. We'll take the voucher in the shop. Spectral pack. There's not really that much that I'm interested in. I can show you the deck here. It's just 14 cards. So here are all these Kings of Hearts. They're all steel. I do have a couple gold ones. They were gold before. And then now I tried to make them all steel. In the Buffoon pack here, there isn't anything that I really want, right? If I get a random negative joker, I can add a random negative joker, but otherwise, this is locked in here. We have all of the jokers, and so the shops are boring for us now. So let's see here. I want Perkeo to copy Cryptid, so we'll go next round, and you can see it here. That's 6 copies of Cryptid every round. And then if I want to score, okay, we'll shuffle over here the Mime. I do have the option here if I want to go for a voucher. And this voucher comes at the cost of by skipping, I don't get my 6 cryptids, but I think that's okay. I think, there are potentially some vouchers that I'm interested in. Is that true? What types of vouchers could we get? I think we're done on vouchers, so I'm just going to go next. And then we'll do again here. I have the 2 gold cards, so I'm going to try to go for the gold cards. So here's discard 4, discard 3. I'm able to draw all of my cards every time. Here's the king. And then I said before, this is just the 1 king and then lots of copies of the Mime. To the 31st, maybe we'll get some extra money from the Mime here. Let's double check the boss here. The boss is base is halved is fine, right? We're still, even if we have things, then we got plenty of points from all of the kings. Arcana pack, maybe the main thing that I'm looking for is money, though I don't necessarily need to spend the money. There's nothing for me to reroll for because I have no joker slots. All my joker slots are full. Same with the standard pack. Maybe it could be an upgrade to have a polychrome card, a polychrome red seal card, but it's not super necessary. I don't need that. And so here's the thing. Okay, we've done all this work. We've done the setup. We've reached Ante 13 already. We have all these cryptids saved up. There really isn't much new stuff to do other than just, here I can play. I don't even have to discard if I don't want to discard. I was just discarding before to get the gold cards to get the money. Here we can just ship it, and then every round just play the 1 card. And so here's what I'm going to tell you. What I'm going to tell you is we're going to skip ahead. Now we've already built the deck. We've already got the jokers. We've already got the cryptids. There isn't really anything too exciting that's going to happen, except maybe if there's like a spicy boss that shows up. And so we'll skip ahead until the point, there is some point where I cannot score enough with just the jokers that I have, and then I need to transition into starting to use cryptids. So we'll skip ahead until that point. Alright folks, welcome back. Actual welcome back. Look, I can do cuts now. I'm only becoming more powerful. Alright. Here we've got, we need E59, and I played a hand, which you didn't see, but I played a hand that was E56. It looked like this. We've done, you know, some rearrangement to the jokers here, and if I want to get the optimal scoring configuration, it's going to be 4 barons with the 3 blueprints, and it's going to be 3 mimes with the 2 brainstorms. So 3 mimes, 4 barons. This is the optimal scoring configuration. And you can see 2 things. 1, it takes a while to score the hand. It takes a while to process. And then 2, in this particular instance, it's not going to be enough points. And so if I wanted to score more, here's how we score more. Let's take one of these kings, and we will add 2 more to our hand. And the thing that I want you to pay attention to is we have E56. How much more do we get by adding 2 cards with 1 cryptid? Ante 22, by the way, is when we get to E59. So with that, with 1 cryptid, we're able to go from 56 to 74. What's that difference? 26? 16? It's a difference of 16. Okay, so that tells me that each king adds 10 to the 8th, which is 100 million times? Is that correct? 100 million times for each king. And then if I go 2 kings using 1 cryptid card, okay, that's 10 to the 16th, however much that is. So that's what it's going to be from now on, right? We need every round I need to rearrange my jokers. I need to make sure Perkeo is being copied as much as possible so I can make as many cryptids as possible. I have the telescope voucher now, so hold on, we've got the telescope voucher. So if I wanted to, I could, every celestial pack is guaranteed to give me Pluto, though, I already have a level 98 high card, and so each additional one doesn't matter super much. I can go Arcana packs for money, but there isn't really too much use for the money because I don't need to reroll that much. I guess I could take it while it's here. Just kind of re-rolling here. I do have the observatory voucher that gives me an extra times 1.5 if I have a Pluto card, but it's like really annoying to interact with the consumables here with so many of them. It kind of bugs out, and so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put Plutos up here. But that's it. Okay, so we did our shopping here. We've got the copying the Perkeo. Let's go next round. And then if I want to score, it looks like this. Here's my 4 barons. Here's my mime times 3. If I get a particularly bad boss, I have the boss reroll voucher. But other than that, we go in, make 2 more cards, and then this is enough to score for now. And then maybe it's enough to score in the next ante, and maybe it's enough to score in the next ante after that, but it won't be enough, when we're into ante, what is it? Ante 25, we know that one's supposed to be E84 was not enough, or E85 or whatever it was that we had in our first run on the plasma deck. And so that's going to be the pattern from now on. 1 cryptid per round, plus 6 cryptids per round, use 1. And then when we get to Ante 24 or 25, then it'll be 2 cryptids per round. And then so on after that. So we're going to do another skip here. I'm not going to make you wait, 5 minutes for each hand to process. Alright, we're back. I did some thinking, and actually I was wrong before. It wasn't, it wasn't 10 to the 16th, it was 10 to the 18th for each cryptid. So 10 to the 9th for each king each king is times 1 billion. Every king is times 1 billion. And now we are in Ante 24. And we reached the stage where, okay, this e to the 77, you saw with 1 cryptid we could get up to e to the 74. Now this e to the 77, that's not 1 cryptid, that's 2 cryptids every round. So that's an update. Number 2 update, we've got in Ante 24, or kind of like every 8 antes, if you didn't know, that's when we have sort of like the final boss type. Here we've got the amber acorn that's going to turn all my jokers face down. It is kind of annoying. I do have a boss reroll, though there are worse versions than this, and so I'm going to try to do this one, as annoying as it might be. Also, related to this, if I go to the run info, if I go to the vouchers here, I did realize there is a voucher that I want. The upgraded version of the director's cut, the reroll voucher, allows you to reroll infinitely many times as long as you have money, and we have plenty of money. And so if we got that, the boss reroll voucher, we could reroll this 7 or 8 times until we get one that's easy, like the violet vessel, the purple one. Anyway, if we go into the round here with 1 and then 2 cryptids. Okay, this is what it looks like. By the way, we're up to 330 consumables now. It is starting to lag a little bit. Alright, and I'm not going to make you sit through every version of this same hand. As sort of long as it is scoring here. I do want to try out the boss though, with the face down jokers, just for fun while we're here. And then probably what we'll do is we'll skip ahead again until the next interesting thing happens. I've gotten into the point in my shopping experience, even though my rerolls only cost 1, even though my rerolls are inexpensive, I decided more and more that there isn't anything that I want. Though this voucher, I wasn't taking it before, I will take it now. That's something that's like kind of funny about going into these higher antes. Once you get to Ante 20 or Ante 30, you've kind of seen every voucher. You can buy every voucher. And so now, if I buy this, then I won't see it again, and it'll be easier for me to find. I really want the infinite re-rolling voucher. And if we go next, still at least a little bit amusing, Perkeo pumping out 6 cryptids. Though I will admit, getting, it's kind of drawn out here, getting a little tired. Okay, it's all face down. We've got, some combination of blueprints and brainstorms in there. What I need to find out is, where are the mimes? Where's the Perkeo? That sort of stuff. So one thing I can do is I can just play a hand. Okay, this is a Baron that's re-triggering, or this is a Baron. This is a blueprint, Baron, blueprint, mime. And so what I would like is mime on the left. So mime gets copied by the brainstorms, wherever the brainstorms happen to be. This is not currently doing anything, so my guess is that this is a blueprint. Let's test that theory. So we were correct. These are blueprints. And then now, since this is a mime, here's a brainstorm, here's a brainstorm. And I could grab one of these two is a blueprint. This one and this one. So let's do this. Blueprint there. Okay, so this was a blueprint. But right now it's currently copying the brainstorm. So I want it here. There, we've got blueprint, blueprint, blueprint. Here's the Baron. Here's brainstorm. Here's brainstorm. This is my Perkeo. And in order to beat this, I need 2 copies of Cryptid and then ship it. So 1, 2, 3, 4 kings, re-trigger. 1, 2, 3, 4 kings, re-trigger. And then this one is the re-trigger. Alright, anyway, we know this is going to work, so we can skip ahead again. And I'll see you a little bit later on. Okay, this is it, folks. This is the moment we've been waiting for, we've been working towards. This is now Ante 38. This will be the last Ante that's actually beatable, and then Ante 39, that'll be the unbeatable one. Before we move on here, I've got, just a few weird things to show you. So maybe we've got in the vouchers here, we've got them all. And, it was kind of funny. It took us until like Ante 32 in order for us to get blank voucher for the first time, and then that resulted in us being able to pick up the antimatter not much longer after that, though we haven't really been re-rolling in the shop, and so I haven't really been using the extra Joker slot. Now, someone asked me before, what happens if you have a negative version of every planet and then you open, let's say, a Celestial pack? And what we've said in the past is kind of whenever you're holding on to a consumable, it blocks duplicates. Whenever you're holding on to a Joker, it blocks duplicates. You can't see duplicates. But if you have one of every planet, then if there's no duplicates, what will it give you? And what the game does is it defaults to giving you Pluto in that case. And it'll do the same thing for tarot cards. If you have all the tarot cards negative and then you're supposed to get a random tarot card, it'll give you a Fool. Or you open an Arcana pack, it'll show you 3 Fools, even if you don't have the Showman. The default Joker is just the regular base Joker. We call him Jimbo. And then for the vouchers, if you make it to, let's say, Ante 38 and you buy one of every voucher, then what does it give you after you have all the vouchers? It generates a blank voucher. And you can actually do this on the Anaglyph deck. You take all of the skips and then, or you get all of the double tags from the Anaglyph deck, and then when you take the voucher skip, all of those double tags can generate all the vouchers, and then you'll get extra copies of the blank voucher. Though if you take it, it doesn't really do anything. You can even go in here and see your vouchers. Okay, it didn't make any change. All right, let's go ahead and just skip to the end. Redrawn face down, no problem. Use enough cryptids so that we can beat the boss. Yeah, just give me a second to get the fire going here. I don't remember exactly how many it's going to be, but I know that works. All right, now that we got to go, now we can talk. So in the previous round, you know, I was just using cryptids. I ended up hitting the nan-inf score, and then so that's why the display is weird here. So if you didn't watch the Scooty video, that's one of the things that we discovered was once you hit the nan-inf score once, then it messes up your display for the rest of the run. That's kind of like a weird thing. When you get to, let's say, Ante 27 or so, 27, 28, 29. Anyway, at some point, you know, it requires you more and more cryptids each round in order to beat the scoring threshold here. We said each king is E9, right? So 10 to the 9th, you know, times 1 billion to your score. Every cryptid is 2 kings, and then so that's 10 to the 18th. You know, once we get to here, okay, now it's going to require me, you know, whatever 289 divided by 18 is going to require me that many cryptids. I think to hit the nan-inf score, it's about 15 cryptids that I got to use each round. Well, you don't have to play every round. And so once you reach the point where Perkeo is giving me this many cryptids, it's costing me this many cryptids, so it's negative, you know, I'm losing cryptids, you could just skip the rounds. So just skip straight to the boss and then use however many cryptids that you need. And so, you know, if it takes you 15 cryptids to hit the infinite score, then you can just do 15 cryptids each ante. 10 antes is 150 cryptids. 20 antes is 300 cryptids. And so, you know, around ante 30, I figured out, hey, I actually don't need more cryptids. I have already made enough to last me for the rest of the run, and so I got rid of Perkeo so that I didn't have to worry about, you know, moving it around. Also, folks asked the question about, you know, what happens with Senior Huesos. So, you know, what happens if, you know, the score requirement is infinite and then you score infinite and it tells you that, well, you didn't score enough, right? What happens if you have Mr. Bones? All right, so we were able to beat that round. We were able to beat Ante 38. And then now we'll go ahead and go into the next round. And all of the scores are Nan. Nan for not a number. And so if I go in here, you know, just in the small blind, okay, and I want to do that, then let's use our cryptids here. Actually, sorry, before we use the cryptids, I want to get down to the last hand because I want to see what happens with Mr. Bones. So let's do it for science. I guess I could move these so that it'll process faster. Yeah, you're right. I'll fix it. What needs to happen is we'll go Baron here and we'll go Mime here. Alright, let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Much faster, much faster. Alright, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Another 5. And one more time for science. So let's go 4 barons, 3 mimes. Start copying here. I'm not counting the cryptids, but I do know I need to go up to 39 cards. Not exactly 39, but I know that 39 is definitely enough. So we'll go 39 and then ship it. Alright, while that's cooking, you know, while we got that in the oven, I will say that I am not the first person to do this. You know, like I said, we've got a whole team of folks in the Balatro Discord, you know, smart folks who, you know, do the theory crafting, some folks who actually, you know, play the runs. And so someone has already done this. Someone has already beaten Ante 38, reached Ante 39, and so that's how I know that this is how it works, and that, you know, this is a worthwhile thing for me to do, to experiment. I'm just doing it to teach you folks, you know, you folks who aren't in the Balatro Discord, aren't in on those conversations. Though maybe something that hasn't been tested yet is the Mr. Bones thing, but we're pretty sure it doesn't work. I will say, you know, while we're on our way out here, the Perkeo stuff is pretty ridiculous, right? You know, getting these negative copies of consumables, you know, any kind of consumable, being able to stack them up, sort of infinite pile of stuff, you know, even just copying temperance, you know, plus $50 every round. And then, you know, even more ridiculous with the blueprints and the brainstorms being able to copy Perkeo. And so, you know, going into the future, if you want to see like high score stuff, or if you want to see like, oh, try to get the most money that you can, you know, stuff that I've done in the past for the demos, Perkeo kind of ruins all of that, or at least, you know, sort of this combination, this strategy kind of ruins all that. And so maybe in the future I do want to continue making these kind of interesting, wacky, you know, sometimes hyper optimized seeded runs, sometimes, you know, other just weird experiments on random seeds. We're probably not going to come back to Perkeo. This is probably the last you're going to see of Perkeo. And then that'll do it, folks. So we got the score, we got the infinite score, we scored as high as possible, and Senor Huesos was not enough to save us. You can, you know, with the cryptids, you know, score technically higher, you know, get more cards and then score higher. We could have done that. We could have made a deck that had 1,000 cards in it if we wanted to. It doesn't matter, you know, regardless of what the theoretical score is, the game tells you that it's infinite. And infinite, turns out, is not enough. And so Ante 39, that is where the game ends. Alright, I hope you folks take care of yourselves, take care of each other.